PokeClass is sponsored by CollectorsCash.com, and they now have Dark Explorers in stock at incredible prices. Are you looking for that last card to complete your deck, or looking to boost your collection in any set of the game? Then Collectors Cash is where you need to be. They stock all of your boxes, tins, and singles of Pokemon, and any other card game for that matter, at very competitive prices. So make sure you visit www.collectorscash.com after the show.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 72 of PokeClass. I'm going to be talking about one of the most hyped, and possibly one of the most provenly hyped deck in the format, Darkai EX, Tornadus EX. Now this deck has been winning Battle Roads and even starting to win Nationals all over the world. So without further ado, I'm going to get straight to it by giving you a skeleton list, giving you a list of tech options as well, and how to play the deck too. So let's get straight to it. So this deck features two main characters, Darkai EX and Tornadus EX, the two most powerful EXs from the new Dark Explorers set. Now what this deck mainly features on is getting fast energy out on the field and manipulating it and making sure you can attack on turn 1, 2, 3 and even the rest of the game constantly, while sniping your opponent's bench at the same time. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with the skeleton list, which is just here, and we start off with 3 Darkai EX. Now all of you should be familiar with Darkai EX by now, and if you're not, then start to get familiar with it if you're going to Nationals very soon. It has 180 HP, it's a dark type, and has the ability Dark Cloak, which allows any Pokemon on the field to have free retreat as long as they have dark energy attached, as long as Darkrai is in play of course. And its second its attack for 2 dark energy and a colourless, called Night Spear, does 90 damage to the active and 30 damage to the bench. Now when we were looking at stuff like Zekrom that could do 120 damage for the same amount of energy, it doesn't sound too great, but with the energy acceleration and boost from both Dark Patch and Dark Claw, Darkrai can do some serious damage and set up KOs elsewhere, which is what makes it so strong. Now the fighting weakness is definitely Darkrai's Achilles heel, but what we've got in here to counter that is Tornadus EX, the second attacker in the deck. Now this guy has 170 HP, is weak to lightning, and has a -20 resistance to fighting, which is probably the main aspect of why it's in this deck. The first attack, called Blow Through, does 30 damage, but if there's a stadium in play, you do 30 more damage. So with double colourless, you can possibly get a 60 damage attack off on the very first turn before your opponent has even had a chance to do something. Now this can donk a lot of stuff and apply early pressure if you don't get the donk on stuff like Dynamos, and if you include plus power in your list, you can donk Smeargles, Shaymins, anything else. So a lot of basics do suffer from this when they have to evolve. Now the second attack, Power Blast, for 3 colourless energy does 100 damage, and then you have to flip a coin. If you get Tails, you have to discard an energy attached to Tornadus EX. Now the discarding of the energy isn't too bad, since if you've used Blow Through on the first turn with the double colourless, you can attach a Darkness energy, attack for 100 damage on turn 2, which is incredibly efficient by the way. And you can, if you get Tails, you put the dark energy into the discard pile, ready to use with Dark Patch later on. And if you don't, if you flip heads, then you keep the energy there and you can use Power Blast next turn. So a pretty consistent 100 damage on turn 2 is incredibly powerful in this format, especially if you've done 60 damage or 30 damage on the first turn. Now to go with these, you have 2 Smeargle from Undaunted or Call of Legends, whichever artwork you prefer. Now what you use this Pokemon for is Portrait, which allows you to look at your opponent's hand, choose a supporter there and use it for the turn, which doesn't count for your own supporter use for the turn. What this allows you to do is get as quick start as possible, since you can use your own draw supporter and then use your opponent's supporter, or the other way around if you've got a bad hand. The best part about using Smeargle is that you can use free retreat from Darkrai's Dark Cloak, and then use something like Shaymin, which we'll talk about in a second, to move the energy off if you don't need it for later on. So an amazing poker power paired with the free retreat given by Darkrai makes this a definite main candidate for the deck, since it makes your deck that much more consistent and keeps an eye on your opponent's hand as well. If they have a bad hand, you know not to play something like N, or you know what they're possibly going to do the next turn, so it's definitely a great card to have in there. Next up you've got Shaymin from Unleashed, which I'm sure you're all familiar with by now. And it works in the same way it always does. It uses its Poker Power Celebration Wind, which is when it enters into play, you can move all your energy on your board around to different Pokemon. Now what this helps you to do is possibly get the turn 1 or switch between Darkrai's when you get to the mid game, and even switch between the EXs during any stage in the game. So say you've got a lot of energy on the board and your Darkrai is heavily damaged and you want to play another Darkrai down and start getting a new fresh attack on the board. All you do is free retreat into the fresh Darkrai because you've got dark energy attached, play the Shaman, move all the energy across and start using Night Spear again with a fresh Darkrai that your opponent must get through. This is incredibly powerful and can be used multiple times if you pair it with the right cards like Super Scoop Up or possibly Seeker, and it's just an incredible asset to have to help you out in the mid to late game. And that is pretty much all the Pokemon you're going to need. Not many Pokemon, but all your Pokemon hit hard and have high hit points, so you're not going to need too many here. So let's move on to trainers and supporters and see what we've got to support this. Now, a very popular supporter line also features in this deck, which features in possibly most builds at the moment, and that's 4 Professor Oak's New Theory, 4 Professor Juniper and 3 N. This just gives you the maximum amount of draw power you need for an entire game. When you pair it with stuff like Random Receiver to fish out those supporters when you most need them, then you just have enough draw support to get you through the whole game. You don't need any more than this. This is probably the maximum you could fit in because you've got Smeargle and multiple copies of Smeargle to help you out when you don't have the supporters in hand or a way to get them out. All of them are just straight draw power, and N is just there to help you out in the late game when you've got good board position and you just want to disrupt your opponent a bit more. Onto trainers, and you've got the standard 4 Junkam and 4 Catcher. This just gives you the most versatility when you're using Darkrai's Night Spear attack. What you can do is attack the active for 90 or 110 if you've got Dark Claw attached, hit something on the bench for 30, catch up the thing with 30, and then get 2 KOs at once, which is the most powerful part of using Darkrai. You can take 2 prizes in 2 turns without having to KO an EX, which is incredibly powerful at the moment and can get you back into games and kill bench sitters such as Smeargle and Shaman and Celebi and stuff like that, just to get you some free prizes. 4 Dark Patch is a necessity in this deck. I've tried it out with 3 Dark Patch and it really doesn't run as smoothly. Your deck depends on Dark Patch a ton, so you're going to have to draw into them pretty frequently to keep your deck going as fast as possible. If you don't draw them in the early game, then don't worry too much because you can manually attach to a Darkrai and save those Dark Patches for later on in the game, and they help you so much I can't put it into words. So yeah, it's just a great asset to the deck. You can't run any less than this, well you can, but it's playing a very risky game. If you're searching for the space, you can try it with 3 Dark Patch, but I'd definitely suggest putting in 4. It's just your main energy acceleration in the deck. Up next is 2 Sky Arrow Bridge, which you don't usually see in straight Darkrai lists because you don't need the free retreat, and possibly seems a bit strange. But what the main thing is for this is so that you don't have to attach energy to Smeargle, and you can use Blow Through with Tornadus on the first turn for 60 rather than the mediocre 30. Now, not having to put the energy onto Smeargle is an incredible asset because you don't need to waste the energy or a Shaman drop to save the energy for later on, and you can just attach it to your Darkrai and power it up straight away rather than going through the Shaman route. It's just a great card to have, gives your Tornadus free retreat as well when your Darkrai isn't on the field. Up next is your Ball engine, which I've got 3 Dual Ball and 1 Ultra Ball in this deck. What you can go for is 4 Dual Ball or 4 Ultra Ball, either or is good. Ultra Ball is great for getting dark energy out of your hand in the early game or late game to use as Dark Patch later to get some free energy attachments, and can just guarantee you getting that key Shaman out in the game when you definitely need it. In my current list I do run 4 Ultra Ball, but I'm starting to lean towards using a mixture of both because Ultra Ball isn't that Junkam friendly. It does save you from flipping to get key Pokemon in the game, but if you have a mixture of the two, you can Junkam for Dual Ball when you need it the most. Ultra Ball is going to net you, well, it's going to waste 5 cards using your Junkam. You're going to use a Junkam, which is 1 card, Junkam away 2 cards, that makes 3, and then get rid of 2 more, which makes 5 cards, which is what you don't need when you're hitting in the late game. Ultra Ball wastes a lot more resources, but does get you that definite Pokemon, and Dual Ball, it's all about flips. So if you hate flips, go for Ultra Ball. Both of them, I think a mixture of both is the best, so try it out, it's up to player's choice. Up next is another consistency booster, which is Random Receiver. I'm sure you all know this card by now. It's possibly replaced PokeGear altogether, unless you're running Pokemon Collector. And because you run a Dual Ball, Ultra Ball engine in this deck, you don't need to run PokeGears, because you can just, every time you play a Random Receiver, you're definitely guaranteed some form of draw supporter. So every time you play this, you're guaranteed a new fresh hand of 6, 7, or guaranteed to disrupt your opponent in the late game. It's just a great card to have, and make sure you include at least 2 of these in your list. Up next are the 4 tool cards in your deck, which can make your Darkrai's and Tornadus even harder to kill, and that is Eviolite and Dark Claw. Now Dark Claw is obviously only be used for Darkrai because 110 damage rather than 90 is just going to get you a lot more KOs when you use it in conjunction with Catcher. Using the 110, as I said earlier, on the active and 30 on the bench and then switching them around with Catcher can get you double KOs in a turn, so it's definitely a great asset to have. Eviolite just makes your Darkrai's last longer, it helps you against Terrakion and Groudon because they can't one-shot you, and makes your Tornadus even stronger against those fighting types since it'll be buffering 40 damage rather than traditional 20 without Eviolite. It's just a strong card when you're dealing with a deck of entire basics and saves you from KOs when you would otherwise. So that's pretty much your trainers and supporters for now, and onto their energy, where I've got 10 basic dark and 3 double colourless. 10 basic dark just seems to be enough to get energy into the discard pile early on, and 3 double colourless is just enough to keep your Tornaduses hitting for as much damage as they possibly can without having to use Shaman. And that is pretty much your skeleton list, so let's move on to a few techs that you can include to make this deck more your own. The first option you have is taking out Tornadus EX altogether and putting in more things like more Smeargle, more Shaman, Super Scoop Up and Max Potion. What this helps you to do is to get Darkrai out even quicker than this deck and do more heavy damage on the first and second turns. You can get a Darkrai set up in one turn fairly easily when you've got multiple Smeargles, Switch, Sky Arrow, Free Retreat and everything like that, Dark Patch. You can just power up Darkrai even faster than having to rely on Tornadus to attack on turn 1. A lot of people like to use Max Potion as well in this list, just to keep your Darkrai's alive for longer. You can Shaman energy across and then use Max Potion and then start building a fresh one up on the bench again, stopping your opponent from taking 2 prizes in the process. I personally like that version of the deck better, but it does struggle against fighting types, especially Groudon, so if you're worried about fighting types, definitely run this version of the deck. And as I just mentioned, you can also run Terrakion and Shaman techs. A Terrakion of your own will take down opponent's Darkrai's and be quite helpful in the Zekrom Eels matchup. But what this does mean, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of consistency because Terrakion isn't the best starter, obviously, and you're going to have to start to fit in 2 or 3 fighting energy or prism energy to help your cause. Now the problem with running fighting energy is that that could be dark energy you could be putting into the discard pile with Dark Patch, and just doesn't help your consistency a lot. If you are expecting to play a lot of Darkrai, I would suggest trying it out. Having to sacrifice consistency is just going to make this quite hard to pull off. However, a version of this deck with Terrakion in has won a Nationals in another country, so definitely try it out as it is very effective in the mirror match. And last but not least is 1 or 2 Switch, which just maximises your versatility in the first few turns. What this helps you to do is save your single retreat for the turn by using Switch rather than retreating through Darkrai's ability or Sky Arrow Bridge, and just make sure you can pull off multiple portraits for turn and still be able to attack on the first turn with the help of 2 or even 3 supporters if you add in your own when you've portraited multiple times. It just adds a lot to this deck and adds a lot of versatility to the first few turns, as I just said, and is a great asset, so definitely try it out if you're looking for a bit more work in the first few turns. And that is pretty much your best deck in format right now. It's very fast, has a lot of versatile options and has a strong counter to its main weakness, and it has been winning Nationals and Battle Roads all over the world, as I said at the beginning of the video. So thanks for watching, do give this deck a try if you can afford it, because it is a very expensive deck at the moment since Darkrai is at the height of its cost and Tornadus is slowly rising as it wins more and more tournaments. But definitely give this a go, even if you just want to proxy it and test against it. So I hope this helps in your preparation for Nationals. Good luck to those of you that have tournaments over the next few weekends. Make sure you rate, comment and subscribe as usual in the top left hand corner and above this video, and thanks for watching.